Shame is something that is placed upon you. The origins of the word shame means to cover. In Setswana, shame is khala. In isiZulu is uhlazo. And in Afrikaans, verneder. Dumelang ko gae, ra le amogela mo rise. This evening, we're speaking about shame. Welcome to my lovely co-host, Leka Kajenu. No. Before we get into it, our team went to find out what young women across the country think of shame. Let's take a look.
Hona shame would be in the context of society of Pilang.
Shame for Nakuri when people are treated bad in a society, when people are looked down, that is shame.
It's not really something we done, but if you look about how shame, if maybe it looks shameful, then we're not feel offended. Maybe we're not how we and then people tell you, listen, this thing, then you feel shame.
A friend of mine, so and hona ke le ka bona e le ntwe because I kira ha tsamaya le motho in general ntho tse a di etsang di reflecta ho wena, so ha motho a etsa ntho itseng wena hangata re nka fela go le wena wa di etsa.
I have this special relationship with gay people, and seeing them get insulted, it brings shame to me.
But Wafman and the blackout do have all debating. That's shameful. Yeah, so that's it.
Ooh. Yeah, shameful.
I'd say maybe I can put it a certain way, keep it a strategy, but the way they respond. Maybe how I pere or tight and then people just give you those sounds and noises, then you feel a bit ashamed.
As you can see, I'm a big girl, so many people have they have said something about my weight, and it has made me feel ashamed. You know, I used to ask myself, what is wrong with me? Why are people treating me this way? Those sort of things.
Despite I have to consider the impact in
I learned that, yeah, as Wanana Tansu, we operate a certain way, dignified. Then now when I go to certain places, if, yeah, situation is Mare, there's also freedom of expression. How about a certain way, because that's how you express yourself, then you have the right to that as well.
And I think she's going to finish by saying, and I have the right to judge you for wearing that. Let me ask you, I mean, there was a beautiful moment, which is with the girl, actually, and I know that feeling so well, because what is it for you? What is it that you're most shameful about?
For Mina, it was getting a tattoo at a very young age. And when I think about how my family reacted, I was very ashamed, I was humiliated. So,
but did you regret the tattoo or your family's reaction?
I regretted that I got it at a very young age and I didn't think about it. Because Namaj, when I look at it, I'm like, if I got it now, I would have gotten a smaller one. So yeah, I do regret it.
I'm with you. Kanye?
Maybe mine is not so big, but shame I can remember is that my roommate used to shame me for hanging my panties when men are around. And I still don't get it. They hang up their drawers and they underpen one every time. Mara when as soon as olunganyana and you put up your panties on some you're not allowed to do that. Still don't get it, but yeah.
I think haki khula now, I've discovered that there has been a lot of things I am shameful about. And a lot of them are not are not as obvious that, you know, people would be able to see, you know, but they are often about realizing there's a lot of the way that I live my life, what I believe in that is outside the norm. And you are not, for me, I'm not shameful with everybody. So there's, you know, it's like when you are, for an example, at a family function and you have to be conscious, hey, I must behave this way because this is what is expected of a woman. Right. It's almost as if you are really ashamed of the woman that you have become, the true you that you have become.
And you end up living an ideal way, like you end up having your ideal self instead of your real self, and that's a problem. So we're not giving women the opportunity to explore all aspects of yourself.
It's really critical, I think, for our young women. Shame, you have to take it on, whether consciously or subconsciously. But I'm hoping after this show, people, they'll realize like it's something that you choose, whether it affects you in many ways or not. Reverend Phumzile Mabizela.
Reale amogela gape gompieno Kgomotso o ntse le Reverend Phumzile Mabizela, who is the executive director of the International Network of Religious Leaders Living with HIV. Over to you, Kgomotso.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Welcome to the show. Up until this point, we've been doing a lot of shows, and they're very different. Whether we're talking about contraception, whether we're talking about unplanned pregnancy, creating our own futures, shame comes up a lot. What are the traditional or cultural and as well as religious roots of shame? Because it comes up so often in our lives, which means that it's a big deal.
You've already referred to the systems that affect us, because one of the issues that shape our moral values is the way we are brought up, your background, and also your cultural beliefs and values. When it comes to religion as well, it's another system that brings in another set of moral values. So you have these layers of values that you have to somehow integrate and use them in your life when you make decisions. Right. Now, ihlazo unfortunately comes from other people expecting you to behave in a certain way. And I think the key is knowing who you are, what are your choices in life, and being able to actually make informed choices.
Because if it comes from other people, then whether because we live in communities, and therefore, and how reject one aspect of it, there's a big chance that you will be either frowned upon or shamed, out of existence, so to speak.
No, that is true. However, because of all these systems that you have to work with in order to develop your own moral values, you internalize them. So they form part of who you are. Your identity is very much linked to those moral values. Even when you are exposed to your realization or getting more informed on your rights, you still have that layer of issues that you have internalized. Right. And it's actually a bargaining exercise where you say, am I willing to take that risk, or am I not willing to take that risk?
You, though, you're quite the irreverent reverend.
Well, I don't know what that means.
Well, it means that you say that you've never experienced shame because you've just never allowed it to come into your space. How do you manage that in a country in the expectations of behavior?
It's a long journey. It's not easy. I think it's a long learning process. You make choices, you make mistakes, you choose people who will be your mentors, you learn different ways of reading the Bible, the Quran, because there are different theologies out there, but most of the time we are not even exposed to them. Sure. So with my level of exposure, I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to women who have made decisions or choices in their lives that give them the liberty to live their lives in its fullness. Sure. So that's basically how I lived. Also at home, my father affirmed me as a girl. So growing up, I always know that I'm a human being. I'm not a sub-human being or someone inferior.
But then your father at the same time was a catalyst in changing your mind about how life should be and how you're going to carry yourself. Tell us about that.
That is true. The way he brought us up is basically he helped us to understand that we are all very important in the eyes of God. So what we tend to get mixed up in our communities is the issue of sex and gender.
Right.
Sex is biological, you are born in a certain way, but gender is learned. So it's your parents who choose how they are going to construct you as a human being. So basically what you become starts from the clothes that your parents buy for you, the toys that your parents buy for you. So the whole issue of differentiating between sex and gender, it's very important in Africa, even for boys, because they don't realize it's a system of patriarchy, which actually promotes the oppression of women. It also dehumanizes men, because it puts them on a pedestal, and then there are all these expectations, and then they think, I will never be shamed, I'm a superhuman being, which is of course not.
What about, I find that a lot of these things have a lot to do with sex or women's sexualities, not so much with men. An effort to, that shame is the source of a lot of things that are related with us owning our sexuality. What's that about?
You know, we were told for a very long time, good, you don't talk about your genitals. You don't talk about your sexuality.
Never mind touching them.
Oh, no, you don't even go there.
You don't even go there.
No. Now, sexuality is a gift from God. Our sexuality is just as important as our spirituality. So once you focus on nurturing your spirituality and you ignore your sexuality, you are not growing as a whole human being. So our sexuality, you are right, your letter is shame, because once you become aware of your sexuality, you almost have to hide. You know, this is not something that I'm supposed to talk about. Right. So we need to find ways of saying to people, actually for a very long time, we were given an incorrect information on our sexuality. That is the first thing. Right. The second thing is, when people don't know how to teach young people or older people about sexuality, sometimes they reject it completely because they don't know where to start, or they give you incorrect information.
Who are the custodians of this shame?
Yeah.
Like, who owns it?
It goes right across. Imithetho ekhona kuma cultures ethu. They are mostly developed by men, but the gatekeepers are women.
Right.
Yeah. So we internalize these things and we tell ourselves, in order to be perceived as a good woman, I need to promote these teachings because they are part of our culture.
And that elevates you as umfazi obamba umthetho.
It does. And what it does is that a younger woman who is watching you says, there is my role model. I also want to be like her. Meanwhile, you go through a process now at night when you're sleeping all on your own. You know that some of the things that you are promoting are not right.
Indeed. So tell me about your congregation or congregations that you work with. What kind of incidents of shame do you find young women suffering from that you need to then counsel them out of?
Okay. One of them is when a young woman falls pregnant in a church.
Of course.
What tends to happen is you are called to the pastor's office, you are giving a long lecture or counseling, and some of them are excommunicated. In some cases where your church has uniform, you are asked to stop wearing your uniform for some time until you've given birth to the baby and you'll be forgiven. Now, the irony of it all is nobody asks, where's the boy? We don't impregnate ourselves as women. Where are these men?
Or by the Holy Spirit?
No, that only happened a long time ago with Mary.
Once.
And that was it. Maybe in future it will happen, but we are not sure. Now, even when people know who has impregnated you, most of the time, nothing gets said about that man. It's your responsibility. You should have chosen not to fall pregnant. Now, the problem yet is that biologically you can see what I'm pregnant. There are lots of men who are walking around pregnant, but we don't see them. That's their advantage.
Reverend, when we come back, the conversation continues, and we'll be speaking about shame. Siyanamukela futhi eRise. I've invited all of my co-hosts to join us because this is our last episode of this season. And shame, as you all know, has been a recurring theme. In which episodes does it stick out the most? And if you have any questions for the Reverend, what would it be about shame?
For me, it's the unplanned pregnancy episode. You know, as young people, when you're pregnant, it's almost as if you're wearing your shame for everyone to see. And that limits us from certain choices that we can make. How do we overcome those feelings of shame? Explore all the choices we have at that point, Reverend.
Ngicabanga ukuthi isikhathi esiningi excuse me, isikhathi esiningi you fall pregnant because you feel under pressure. Awukazazi ukuthi ubani, you don't even enjoy ukuba a woman or ozoba successful in life. Usually, unplanned pregnancies, we are looking for acceptance, we are looking for uthando at the wrong places, ungakabi ready. So ihlazo kuwena ukuthi uyazi ukuthi akufanele ngabe ngiyenzile lento. Kodwa ukuba ubunikeziwe i-information, ubuzokwazi ukwenza informed choices, uzivikele, uvikele no partner wakho ungakhuleka. Asike sithi selenzekile kiphutha. Umntwana is a gift from God. So what should you be ashamed of? Ngoba usekhona a gift from God angekwazi ukumlahla. So ukushintsha all the time, you need to think of ngikule simo for some reason. There has to be a reason why I'm here today, right now. And don't focus on what other people are going to say.
But why is there so much shame associated with sex in religion and in culture? Because for young people, we really have that problem.
I think it's the way it has been presented. Most of the time when you talk about sex, people think of sexual intercourse. Whilst actually sex is just biology. It's how you are born. You have a certain set of genitals. That's all sex is. But when you talk about sexual intercourse, that's a very intimate thing. Okufanele ube ready before you engage in it, because it has consequences. Now, what tends to happen because we don't give children, there's this mystery about sex. And you feel under pressure to experiment with it. But remember, it's going to affect your body, it's going to affect you psychologically, it's going to affect your spirituality as well. So that's why I'm saying shame comes from all these things which you should have done and you haven't done.
Okay. Now, a number of young women are infected with HIV, and it's yet another area, I guess, associated with sex again, that when they get that diagnosis, they feel is the end of the world. How do we help young women who are living with HIV overcome that shame and that guilt of being HIV positive?
And also bearing in mind that you are living openly.
Yes.
And you disclosed, you know, just tagging on to your question, Lebo, is like what allows you to be able to just say to total strangers and people that you know, yes, I do have an HIV infection and this is how I'm living with it.
Yeah. Within the network, in Arela, one of the themes that we have is HIV is a virus. It's not a moral issue.
Okay.
One. Two, people need to understand that there are different transmission modes of HIV. Are we totally telling a sexual intercourse? It can be a blood transfusion, it can be an injection that was used on you, such that prevention strategy, AABC, we have changed it, and we have a new one, SAVE, which stands for Safer Practices, Access to Medication, and VCT and Empowerment of Women. Now, living with HIV, in my case, for instance, when I was diagnosed in 1999, I was devastated, of course. But then I had to reflect on who am I? What is this HIV going to do to my body? Who are the people who will support me in my journey? And that was the most important thing. More focus on I should have done that. You end up feeling guilty, and it affects impilo yako actually, because the more stress you have, the more your immune system becomes weak. So you make a choice on a daily basis. There is stigma out there, which is an attitude. There is shame out there, which is a combination of attitude and actions. Discrimination, it's people's behavior, how they respond to you as a person. You have a choice. You can decide every morning, Noma bangangihlaza kangakanani. I am not going to allow it to affect me. And that's basically how I've managed ukuphila isikhathi eside, such that I was hoping HIV will help me lose weight, but it hasn't worked. So you somehow end up with this relationship with the HIV.
Sure.
Enye into lethi ihlazo ama-secret asekhaya, iy'fihlo zasekhaya. Mina into engifuna ukuyazi ukuthi uyenza kanjani ukuthi le y'fihlo zasekhaya zingaku-affect elifini, zingakuyenzi ukuthi walk around with burdens in your life and ufile ngathi it was your fault because of le y'fihlo lezi zasekhaya.
Kukhona lento esikhula sitshelwa ukuthi you belong, therefore I am. So you are part of a community. So your behavior affects abanye abantu. Your parents' behavior affects the whole community. But what young women, for instance, need to learn, ama-secrets abazali, they are not yours. You deal with your own issues. They are your parents' issues, and you did not apply ukuthi uzalwe yilabo bazali. Uzalwe yibona, and they are doing the best that I can. Ama-secrets abo, awabo, let them deal with them, and they will empower you with skills zokuthi kufanele udile kanjani now most of the time. So lama burdens that we end up carrying as well, it's the way we are socialized as women. We are carers. We are nurturers. So ofayo uyinkinga yakho, gulayo uyinkinga yakho, lambile uyinkinga yakho really. You can't carry our problems on Mhlaba wonke.
And that belonging is overrated, quite frankly. I get Lebo.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I think we all want to belong somewhere.
Important.
It's where you belong to that is the problem.
Yeah.
You cannot belong to a group or whatever, noma kusesontweni or whatever that oppresses you. Then you need to choose again where you belong.
Kunalesithombe sokuthi wonke umuntu wesifazane funa aspire to be a superwoman. So what I want to say is choose your battles. Ezinye izinto angiziphenduli. And that has liberated me. Ayiyona yami angizuyiphendula. Ngoba if you are trying to solve all the problems of the world uzogula ngekhanda mase udinge counseling.
All the time. Listen, this has been an incredible 26 episodes. That it's certainly changed my life. I hope to the young people here and the older ones.
Oh, absolutely.
Like us, that your lives as well at home have somewhat been transformed. And thank you so much for joining us in these first 2 seasons of Rise. We hope you've enjoyed celebrating with us. What is it? When you think back to kind of things, reflecting, reminiscing. Of course, without you, our wonderful audience, we wouldn't even be here. And remember to keep the conversations going on Twitter, Facebook, and Mxit Reach. Guess what? It's a wrap. See you next time.
Bye.
Whoa.
Woof, woof.